bit since I did a full-on Storytime video, hasn't it? So, back at the start of this year, I made the decision to move to a new house in a new city, and it went, interestingly. And while I wasn't originally planning on making a video on that whole debacle, well, the people have spoken, and seems like y'all still enjoy hearing about my suffering, huh? I guess that tracks, considering my most popular videos are all about me going through it. Some of y'all who have been here for a while may remember my first moving video. You don't have to watch that one first, but it'll be a good prequel for some additional context. You'll get to hear about me almost getting wrapped up in a lawsuit about solar panels, that's fun. Additionally, in that video, I was only moving into a new house. This time, I not only had to buy a new house, I also had to sell my old one at the same time, which added an entire extra layer of, oh my god, what the f***ery to this whole thing. Lastly, before we get in too deep, this video is sponsored by Artex, who sent me their new set of 120 paint markers. I'll be using these to do a little bit of drawing in the background, and I'll have a review of the markers at the end, so be sure to stick around for that. But, okay, let's take this one step at a time and start from the beginning. Back when I bought my first house in 2022, I ended up getting a house about an hour north of the city I grew up in. My logic at the time was, house prices are way cheaper up here, and since I work from home, I can live anywhere with a post office and an internet connection. My goal was to save money and put as much into the house payment as possible so I could save up and eventually move into a nicer place in a better location once I could afford it. Well, flash forward to the tail end of 2024, and I started realizing that while I was saving a lot of money living so far away from everything, the money I was saving was getting overshadowed by the loneliness and inconvenience of being so isolated. Friends never wanted to come visit because driving to my house was over an hour in each direction, and I had to drive 30 minutes minimum to do any kind of shopping or social interaction. I was missing out on concerts and social events in the closest city because they usually happened in the evening, and I was scared to drive home on country back roads after dark because I might hit something. Because that happened to my brother! He had a wild boar jump out in front of his car once and it nearly totaled his car. It is not an unlikely circumstance. I had been thinking about moving for a while, but at the start of 2025, I finally bit the bullet and contacted a family friend who worked as a realtor, and the process of finding Star House 2.0 began in earnest. So, to keep this whole thing easy to parse, I'm going to talk about the process of selling my old house and buying a new one separately, but just know that all of this was occurring around the same time. First up, let's talk about selling my old place. Now, while I admit I'm not, an expert at maintaining a house or anything, I like to think I generally kept my first house in good condition. I made a few improvements in the time I lived there, like getting the carpets and stove replaced and painting a few of the rooms. However, there was one little issue that had been on the back of my mind almost the entire time I lived in that house, and for the sake of the story, I'm gonna call it the crack. The crack was a thin crack in the kitchen tile that went from one side of the room to the other, and had been there since probably well before I moved in. It wasn't a thick crack or anything, just a thin, scraggly line that was pretty noticeable on the white tile. But I remember asking about it when I was looking into buying the house, and the home inspector said it was probably due to the house settling, and that there wasn't any indication of major damage or shifting, so the crack was mostly just cosmetic. And for the 3 years I lived in that house, the crack didn't change. It didn't get wider, it didn't deepen, it was just a little unsightly line across my kitchen. Put a pin in that, we'll come back to it. Anyway, to start the process of selling the house, we took a few weeks and went through all the stuff related to getting the house on the market. I had the windows and gutters professionally cleaned, thought I was gonna have to get a new roof and didn't, which was lucky, packed up all my personal stuff and hid it in the closets, had a photographer come out and take pictures, put the sign in the yard, and got the listing up online. The whole time I had to keep my house immaculate, as I could get a call from a realtor at any time and have to be out of the house in less than an hour so they could come over and show it. Do you guys know how weird it is to go on a walk around your neighborhood and know there are strangers actively inside your home looking at your things? It's weird. Considering I was in the process of trying to buy a new house at the time, one of the things I was really worried about was the old house taking a long time to sell and how that might affect my ability to buy a new place. I wouldn't be able to start putting offers on a new house until my old one sold. But I ended up getting several offers on the house in just the first week of it being up, which was awesome. And also stressful, because, God, wait, what if I sell my old house before I have a chance to find a new one? What do? I have stuff and cats. Where do I go if that happens? There was a lot of stress trying to dovetail the sale of the old house and the purchase of a new one that I won't go into too much detail on, but just know It is a nightmare. It's my own personal hell. Everyone and their mom wanted to talk to me on the phone every day trying to figure out the logistics. During the whole process, I swear, I was on the phone for at least 2 to 4 hours a day, every day, trying to get things sorted. It is a goddamn introvert's nightmare, and I hated every second of it. Anyway, we ended up getting our first offer on the house. Everything was growing great. And then the home inspector the buyer hired, accidentally tripped a fuse during the inspection, which made my house lose power for a few seconds and fried my computer's hard drive. I had most of my stuff backed up, thank God, but I lost an entire week's worth of work because I didn't have a battery backup for my computer at the time. So let this be a lesson for you friends. Have a battery backup for your PC. They're a bit expensive, but it'll save you time and money in the long run because having to buy a new hard drive and downloading all your backups onto it and redoing an entire week of work is a far greater loss than the $200 you'll spend on a backup battery. Don't be like me, kids. Spare yourself the heartache. So after that travesty, the first offer didn't even go through. The buyer ended up backing out for reasons that were never fully explained to me. But luckily, during this kerfuffle, we actually had a second offer come in, and these guys seemed a lot more promising. Full price offer, cash in hand, ready to buy. They just had to get the house inspected before making the decision final, and this is where it gets weird. So the process of buying a house goes like this. Once the buyer makes an offer and the sellers accept it, you enter something called the option period. The buyers put down a deposit, then have roughly a week to hire a home inspector, get a report done on the house, and make their final decision on if they want to buy the house or not. There's more to it than that, but this is what you need to know for the sake of the story. During the option period, if the buyers choose to buy the house, or if they end up backing out based on the results of the inspection, they get their deposit back. But once the option period is over, if they decide to back out then, they lose their deposit and that money goes to the seller. And that deposit is usually a couple $1,000s. It's nothing to sneeze at. So it's in the buyer's best interest to be speedy about hiring an inspector and making up their mind before the option period ends. The second buyers, however, had a very specific home inspector they wanted to use. But this home inspector didn't have any availability until the day after the option period ended. In short, they wouldn't have anyone to come check out the house until after their negotiating time was over. My realtor and I both thought this was a strange choice, but hey, if it meant they were confident that they were going to buy the house, we weren't going to stop them. So they pay their deposit, the option period comes and goes, the home inspector finally comes out, and okay. The home inspector, when I bought the house, said the crack in the kitchen wasn't a big deal. The home inspector the first buyers hired said the crack in the kitchen wasn't a big deal. The home inspector for the second buyers said that the house had foundation damage that needed to be addressed. Fuck! For those who don't know, foundation issues are like maybe one of the worst things to have come up during a home inspection. Even small foundation repairs can cost thousands of dollars to fix, and in worst case scenarios, fixing it could sometimes cause even more interior damage. Basically, if you're trying to buy a house and you hear the words foundation damage, you run for the hills. So hearing that the house I was selling had foundation issues was about the worst news I could get. Any sane buyer probably would have backed out right then and there. But because the option period had already ended, if the buyers backed out at this point, they'd basically waste that several $1,000 deposit they put down to put the house on hold. They tried to negotiate for an extended option period, to which my realtor said, yeah, no, either buy the house or hand over that deposit. And so began one of the most stressful weeks of my life. The extremely short version is that I hired multiple foundation repair companies to come out and give an estimate on how much it'd cost to fix the issues, all while praying to the house gods that the buyers didn't suddenly decide to back out and make us start the selling process all over again with a publicly listed inspection report that had foundation damage on it, which would have made it so much harder to sell. We also almost had to hire a structural engineer to come out and give a report on the property, which would have been real expensive. Went back and forth with that guy for a while before ultimately deciding that we didn't need to go that route, and while it all ended up fine because the foundation repairs wouldn't actually be that expensive, I definitely lost a few years off my life during the process. Because you have to remember, I was also trying to buy a house at the same time all this was happening, and if the buyers got cold feet and backed out, I wouldn't be able to buy the house I had already put an offer on. I was in hell! In the end, we had multiple foundation repair companies give us an estimate of about $5,000 to fix the issues, which wasn't all that much more than the deposit the buyers would lose by backing out. We ended up cutting the price of the foundation repairs off the house, did a little bit of negotiating back and forth to finalize, and at the end of all that, we were locked in and ready to sell. Part 1 of my hell is over. Yippee! But now, it's time to move into Act 2, because remember, in the midst of all that happening, I was also trying to buy a new house, which is a whole other kettle of worms. Let's get into it. So when I was looking for a new house, there were a few things I wanted to focus on. My old house had a pretty big yard, and I hated having to mow it, especially because it was on a hill, so I really wanted something smaller. I needed at least 2 bedrooms so I could have an order packing and merch storage space for my business. I had a few neighborhoods in mind specifically to make it more convenient for my parents to come visit since they use me as their mailing address, and I had a few other specifics I wanted as far as layout and features go. All in all, we looked at something like 20 houses over a couple weeks. Lots were too small, lots looked great in the pictures but were shitty in person. A few were cute but were missing key features I really wanted. When I bought my first house, I was on a really tight time crunch, but this time I wanted to be able to take my time and not settle on something good enough. There was one house that was right on a cute little park that I loved from the pictures, but the layout was really weird and it ended up being too small. Another was on the small side, but somewhat promising, but it had enough weird things about it that I decided to sleep on it, only to have a nightmare about the house collapsing on top of me, which felt like a bad enough omen that I decided against it. There was another house that I adored the layout of. It was the perfect size in a cute little neighborhood, but despite it having been listed for sale for 6 months at that point, it got snatched up right before I could put an offer on it. That one broke my heart a little bit. And then there was one that looked amazing from the pictures. I was completely smitten, and we didn't even get to go see it because it got bought the day before we had a viewing appointment. I was so mad. All in all, the process of finding a new place was really demoralizing. Trying to buy my first house was a nightmare because back in 2022, houses were getting bought less than 24 hours after they went on the market for thousands over the original asking price, which was a bit of a nightmare. But this time almost felt worse because each time we were so close to something great only to have it slip between my fingers. My mom was helping me scour home listings almost daily, and as much as I really appreciated the help, she was very prone to sending me houses well out of my budget. I decided on a number based on how much I could afford on the monthly payment, and as much as I love my mother dearly, she loved sending me houses that had all the features I wanted for tens of thousands out of my maximum budget. In fact, there was this one house that she was absolutely obsessed with for some reason. We'll call it, the Q house. I don't know, just roll with it. The Q house was $20,000 over my maximum budget, but Mom just would not leave it alone, talking about how cute it was and how nice of a neighborhood it was in and how I could probably negotiate to get the price down if I asked my realtor about it. I kept pushing it off since the pictures didn't really do anything to wow me and it was too expensive, but every few days she brought it up again, like, are you sure you don't want to go see the Q house? And every time I tell her, yes, Mom, it's very cute, but I can't afford it, we need to find something in my budget. A few weeks into house hunting, my immediate family had all gotten together for my brother's birthday lunch, and Mom and I had made an appointment to see just one house on the way out of town, the last house we wanted to see before I widened the search to look at other less convenient neighborhoods. We invited my brother and his girlfriend to come look at it with us just for fun, and the house ended up being Well, okay, it was $30,000 under my maximum budget, which was really good, but I would have had to spend twice that much in renovations just to make it livable. And even then, it was in a weird neighborhood that just kind of gave off a weird vibe that I wasn't into. I was super bummed. I had been hoping that maybe this would be the one, and then I got my hopes and dreams volleyball spiked into the dirt. At this point, the old house was looking like it'd be sold within a few weeks, and now I was on a time crunch to get my stuff out, meaning I was under a deadline to find a new place, which is what I had been trying really hard to avoid because I didn't want to settle because of a time crunch like I did last time, and it was all just really frustrating. We all started walking back to our cars. My head was buzzing with thoughts of maybe finding a short-term apartment to rent while we kept up the house hunt, when my mom pulled me aside to talk to the realtor and brought up the Q house. It was only a 5-minute drive from where we were, and it was vacant, so we wouldn't need an appointment to go see it. The realtor said she could call the sellers right away and we could drive straight over there. Just to see it. Just to check. I rolled my eyes at my mom for being so insistent, but I figured that just looking at it couldn't hurt anything. All 6 of us pulled up to the house, walked inside, started looking around, and we were all simultaneously struck with the same observation. It was perfect. It was in a good neighborhood, had been recently renovated, all the appliances were in good condition, the roof had been replaced only a few years ago, the yard was small enough it would be really easy to maintain, there weren't any major concerns just from looking at it. The only sticking point was the price. I told my realtor, and she said there was a chance we could negotiate the sellers down to something in my budget since the house had been on the market for a little while and hadn't sold yet. The next morning, we put an offer in, and the sellers accepted it immediately. Let's go! Commence the flurry of activity. Same with selling the old house. I had to make a bunch of phone calls, figure out logistics, hire a home inspector, get the utilities set up, put a pin in that, we'll get back to it. And while it was stressful, I was so glad to have finally found a place I was excited about. After a few weeks, we had all the paperwork signed and ready to go. All that was left was the actual move. But that part should be easy. The hard part's done. The old house is sold, the new house has been purchased. Surely it should be smooth sailing from here, right? Right? Well. So, moving. New house has been secured, time to get all my stuff into it. But as I was going into this process, we really quickly started hitting snags. I had all my stuff packed up, but because of how the selling and purchase dates lined up, I was going to need to be out of my old house several days before I got the keys to my new place, which begged the question, where the heck was all my stuff gonna go? I knew friends who had used those moving pod services, and I thought that would be my best bet. I'd get one of the pods dropped off, move all my stuff into it, they'd take it away, I'd turn in the keys to the old house, then spend a night or two at my parents' place before getting all my stuff delivered and unloaded at the new place. So I ordered a pod and had it delivered and immediately started getting nervous that all my stuff wouldn't fit in it. I considered getting a second pod, but they couldn't deliver it before the date I had to be out of the old house. Commence panic. Luckily, by some good luck, we were actually able to move the closing date on the new house up a few days, meaning I'd be able to get my keys a few days early, which pretty much eliminated my need for the pods entirely. At this point, I figured I could just hire movers in a truck the day I got the keys for the new house and bring everything over in one go, which ideally should make things a lot simpler. So I sent the pod back, trying not to be too upset about the several $100s I ended up wasting over it, and started the process of hiring movers. And here's where stuff gets stupid. So the pod company had a list of recommended moving companies, and I originally called and reserved a small moving company to help get all my furniture into the pod. Well, when I didn't need the pod anymore, I got in contact with them again and said, okay, so the plan has changed. I'm not doing the pod anymore. Can you guys just put all the stuff in a truck and bring it to the new house on the same day? And they said yes, followed by, so what kind of truck do you have? What kind of truck do I have? I don't have a truck. You guys are the moving company. Shouldn't you have the truck? That's your job. To which they replied that they didn't have a moving truck for their company and they'd have to rent one. Then they said that since the moving date was so soon, they'd have to hurry and reserve a truck from a rental company, and then hung up on me. It was at this point I should have just called them back, canceled, and gotten a different moving company. And I would have if it wasn't for one thing. I was exhausted. This was after over a month of being on the phone for hours every single day, trying to pack up my house and deal with moving logistics all by myself, and we were so close to the end of the process, I had just given up at this point. Surely, the weird and unprofessional way the movers were acting wasn't foreshadowing future events to come, was it? Surely they'd be perfectly fine and capable once they actually got here to do the job, right? Well, moving day arrives. I have all my stuff in boxes, it's all ready to be packed up and put in the truck. The mover showed up in the early afternoon with the rented truck and pretty immediately got to work. And pretty immediately, things started going wrong. So, when moving pieces of furniture, like couches or whatever, usually movers will wrap it with what is basically a jumbo roll of cling wrap to keep everything clean and put together. These guys started doing the cling wrap around the living room furniture and very quickly ran out of it and didn't bring any extra rolls. They asked if there were any stores nearby that could probably sell more. I said there was a Walmart less than 5 minutes down the road, and they asked if I could go to Walmart and buy more for them. No, I am not leaving you unprofessional people alone in my house with my cat daughters and all my valuables to buy more moving supplies for you that you should have brought with you in the first place. But I was more polite about it and told them no, I wasn't comfortable doing that. So they sent one of the 3 people they had to the Walmart. Again, barely 5 minutes down the road. You could have walked there. It wasn't even hard to get to. You could see the Walmart sign from the entrance to my neighborhood. Should have taken them 15, maybe 20 minutes to get there, buy more cling wrap, and get back. You know how long it took the person they sent to get it? An hour and a half. Like, did they get lost in the Walmart labyrinth? Did they have to fight a minotaur to get to the cling wrap aisle? What the hell happened? They also didn't have enough moving blankets and didn't bring mattress bags, even though I specifically asked if they had mattress bags on the phone the day before, and they said yes, which, again, you guys are a moving company. How do you not have the supplies you need to move things? Oh, I was already getting a headache and we had barely just begun. Anyway, the person finally gets back and they continue putting everything in the truck. The estimate they gave me was that it'd probably take 2 to 3 hours to get everything packed up. It ended up taking 5. And one of the guys kept saying, "We're almost done, probably just another half hour," over and over, and I eventually got so annoyed I said back as nicely as I could manage, "You've been saying that for 3 hours, I'll believe it when I see it." He shut up after that. Hi, Editing Star here. There was even more about how bad these movers were that I forgot to put in the original script. They were all collectively really bad at listening, and I had to repeat myself multiple times for pretty much every piece of information I had to tell them. And when I did try to explain stuff, they kept constantly interrupting me to go off on some tangent about how they had 25 years of experience in the moving business. They've been doing this for 25 years. They've moved furniture for celebrities before, and they're so cool and good at their jobs. And then they scratched the crap out of an antique table I got from my grandparents and broke or chipped several plastic storage containers. 25 years of experience of being bad at their jobs, more like. Anyway. Eventually, they finally get everything in the truck, and I end up very happy I reserved a truck instead of the pods because fitting everything I had into a 26-foot truck ended up being a really tight squeeze. I don't know if it could have even all fit in 2 pods. But we finally had everything out of the house, I packed up the kitties into the car, and I drove down to the new place, the mover's right behind me. And, okay. The drive between my old place and my new one is a little less than an hour. I got to the new place and had time to unload my car and get the cats locked into the master bathroom by roughly 5 p.m. And I figured, okay, the movers are driving a huge moving truck. It's probably gonna take them a little more time to get here. I'll just sit and tidy and try to make sure everything's ready for them when they get here. 6 p.m. passes. Then 7 p.m. I keep getting periodic texts from them saying they were almost there, and another half hour would pass, and they still wouldn't be there. They finally show up after 8 p.m., 3 hours later. Oh, but it's okay, they had an explanation for why they were so late. They stopped for food on the way. And like, okay, I get that you need to eat, but you couldn't have packed a lunch or gone to a fast food burger place or something? They apparently stood in line at some fried chicken place for like 45 minutes, and I'm like, my God, go somewhere faster. You have a car, go through the drive-thru, Jesus Christ. By the time they finally got to my house, it was already dark, and they still had to unload the entire truck. Thankfully, I figured the unloading process would take less time than the loading, and they had called in a fourth guy to help things go a little faster. They said I wouldn't have to pay extra for the fourth guy. They just wanted to make sure we could be done before midnight. And I did not say this, but I was definitely thinking, well, that's good, because if you tried to charge me extra, I would have christened this house with bloodstains. But I was so normal and it was so fine. So here's the part where I'm going to explain something about these movers. There were 3 of them. A man, a woman, probably both in their 40s, and a younger helper guy who looked like he was in his early 20s. The lore is that apparently the older guy and the girl were dating. And let's just say this whole thing was a valuable lesson in why you should never become business partners with your romantic partners, because holy shit. The 2 of them had like 3 separate lovers' quarrels over the course of the day, arguing about how the other person wasn't listening correctly or explaining things badly, while I just had to sit there and awkwardly wish they'd get back to packing up my couch. It felt very, can I please get a waffle? Can I please get a waffle? But it was movers and they were in my house and I hated it. While they were setting up to unload the truck, I took the girl inside and started explaining where all the main pieces of furniture were going to go. And then the guy busted into the house, walked up to us, and started berating the girl right in front of me, saying things like, I think you owe me an apology for what you said on the truck, while I am literally standing right between them. Like, oh my God, guy, can you not do this literally right in front of your client? She looked on the verge of tears by the time he was done, and honestly, the only reason I didn't say anything was because I felt like my furniture was being held hostage. I didn't want to do anything that would piss this guy off and impede the process of my furniture getting put inside my house and getting these guys to leave. But I am sending so much psychic energy to that girl and begging her to leave him and fire him at the same time. Oh my God. Anyway, they start unloading the house, putting furniture in place, reassembling things. I'm directing people and telling them where furniture should go, all that jazz. And while it's going quickly, it's not going as quickly as I would have liked. And the guy keeps disappearing for several minutes at a time. I wasn't sure what that was about, but I didn't question it until out of nowhere, I am greeted with a surprise. Both the guy and the girl go into the seating area of the moving truck and bring out a random old man. What the heck? Who is this? How long has he been in there? The guy looked like 90 and could barely walk, and it turns out he was the guy's grandpa. He had been sitting in the moving truck all day, and they had to bring him in the house because he had to use the bathroom, which, okay, do what you gotta do. But one more point for unprofessionalism, I guess. Why did you have a secret old man with you? Why did you bring him on a moving job with you? Huh? Anyway, several hours later, it's almost midnight. All my stuff is in the house, thank God, and they are finally getting ready to leave. They're tallying up the final cost, and the guy keeps messing up the math and having to start over. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm just screaming, get out, get out, get out of my house, get out of my house, get out of my house! I am exhausted and angry, and if you f*** up Basic Edition one more time, I'm gonna commit a federal crime, get out! They finally finish, I pay the invoice, they leave, and I just collapse into bed. It was an annoying and exhausting day, but at least it was over, right? It was all over and done, and I wouldn't have to deal with any more bullshit, right? Right? So, the next few days were a blur of activity. I had to unpack things, get the house set up properly, unpack all my merch and shipping supplies so I could continue running the business, making sure everything was in the place it was supposed to be, all while trying to keep up with my normal work schedule and preparing to leave for an out-of-state convention in just over a week. But despite how hectic things had been and how stressed out I was, things were going along smoothly. Until a few days in. So, we need to back up a little bit. During the move, I had asked if the movers were allowed/capable of hooking up my washer and dryer. If they couldn't do it, it wasn't going to be a big deal. I could just ask my dad to help in a couple days. I just didn't know how to do it myself. But they very confidently said yes and hooked it up for me while they were unpacking everything. Should have been a red flag how confident they were, considering how shitty of a job they had done the entire rest of the day, but it's fine. This hindsight's 2020 and all that. Cut to several days later. I walk through my laundry room and notice some drops of water on the floor. I think to myself, that's weird. Did I carry something in that dripped water and didn't notice? I poked at the water with my foot, stepped on the floor, and suddenly the water drop got bigger. I stepped back, and more water appeared on the floor where I stepped. Everywhere I stepped on the wood floor, water drips started spontaneously appearing, which is when I realized, to my horror, the water was coming up between the cracks in the floorboards. It was under the floor. I looked behind the washing machine and saw that the water spigot leading to the washing machine was leaking. The movers hadn't attached the water cable correctly, and it was dripping from the faucet into a huge puddle on the floor beneath the washing machine, which meant it had been leaking for 3 days, and I had only just noticed it. Oh my God, you've got to be kidding me! I grabbed every towel in the house and started cleaning up the water, shouted an enormous string of expletives as I very quickly unhooked both the washer and the dryer and used my adrenaline-given strength to push them out into the garage all by myself. In a panic, I called my dad and went, "Dad, the stupid mover's f***ed up and there's water under the floorboards, what do I do?" And he told me to dry it with towels as best as I could, then go rent a floor fan from a hardware store. In the end, I had the floor fan blowing into the open garage, along with the ceiling vent on and my dehumidifier running for 3 straight days before the room was fully dried out. All because the stupid movers got cocky and hooked up the washing machine wrong, which, as I learned later, moving companies usually aren't supposed to do because it potentially makes them legally liable for damage if this exact thing happens. All I can say is that those bastards are very lucky there wasn't any lasting damage because I was so fucking close to calling somebody in a suit about it. Those who are up to date with their star lore know that I used to work at a law firm, and I know a lot of lawyers. I could have done something about it, but thankfully I didn't have to. But I was so close. I was real fucking close. But eventually I got it all sorted. By some miracle, the floor in the laundry room was fine and I was able to get back to work setting up the house. I'd been in the house for about a week at this point. I had avoided the floor disaster. Everything was going great, which of course meant it was time for one more thing. One more problem. The icing on the cake, if you will. So one afternoon, about a week after moving in, I was working on painting the master bathroom, minding my own business and having a grand old time when I accidentally dropped a little bit of paint on the floor. I went to get a wet paper towel to clean it up, but when I turned on the sink, there was no water. That's weird. I tried the other sink, also nothing. I tried the sink in the other bathroom and the kitchen, and no water was coming out of anywhere. I checked online to see if maybe there was a water shutoff in the neighborhood, but couldn't find any notice of one. That's weird. Okay, time to call somebody. I called the city utility lines and explained the situation, asking what happened because I had submitted all my info to get my water hooked up weeks beforehand, so there shouldn't have been any problems. The person on the phone told me they had gotten my application to open water service on my house and had thrown it out because they weren't the ones responsible for my neighborhood's utilities. And they just never told me. I asked who was in charge of my utilities then, and she said my neighborhood has their own special utility company that supplies water and I'd have to call them. Which is fucking great. I had thought I had set up my water correctly through the city, and instead of them telling me, "Hey, we got your application, but actually we aren't the ones who do your water servicing, so you have to call someone else," they just threw out my info and said nothing to me, leading me to think that everything was fine and dandy until my water got shut off. Really cool bureaucratic process you got there, assholes! Anyway, I called the correct utility company right away, saying I was given the wrong information when setting up my account and I needed them to turn my water back on, to which they replied, "Okay, you'll need to set up an account online, but it takes like 48 hours to process the request and another 48 to get the water turned back on. But if you come do it in person, we can get it done sooner, though you'll still have to wait until tomorrow because our office closes in 5 minutes." I nearly punched a hole in my freshly painted wall. The next day, I went to their office as soon as they opened and set up an account in person and asked if they could pretty please turn my water back on. And they said they could usually do it same day if I set up the account in person, but then my specific neighborhood had a real stick up their butts about same day requests and probably wouldn't send anyone to flip the switch back on until the following day, even if I called them directly to ask. Super great first impression of my neighborhood's utilities. But the next afternoon, after spending 2 days without water, I finally got my water turned back on and took a very long shower. Something, you don't know what you have until it's gone or whatever. Thankfully, that was the last debacle of the moving process. I was able to finish painting, got everything unpacked, and several months later, Star House 2.0 is looking pretty snazzy if I do say so myself. I'm still in the process of getting everything set up just the way I want it, but I'm hoping to have everything all put together by the end of the year, and now that I'm nice and settled, I'll never have to move ever again. You know, hopefully. But with the story time over, let's talk about these markers, shall we? Like I said at the top, my sponsor Artex sent me their new 120 pack of brush tip paint markers, and I decided that it would be a good opportunity to draw some fan art for 2 series I've been enjoying recently. I drew Narita Brian, one of my favorite characters from Uma Musume, aka the Horse Girl game if you aren't familiar. And this guy, it's Kelsier from, Fortnite. And also some book series called Mistborn, I guess. Nobody posts spoilers in the comments, I've only finished the first one. I was a smidge nervous going into drawing these because I am really not a painter, like at all. I'm okay using stuff like alcohol markers, but I always remember painting projects being my least favorite in my art classes, mostly because of how much cleaning it required. Boo. But apparently putting paint inside a marker tube makes things a little easier for me. Now you can do your painting and not have to clean off a bunch of palettes and brushes afterwards. Woohoo! Additionally, paint markers are pretty forgiving to use. If you make a mistake or use the wrong color, it's pretty easy to just go back and paint over the mistakes. I ended up regretting my color choices in a few areas and then just painted over the parts I didn't like, easy peasy. The markers come in this box that stores them tipped down so the brush nibs don't dry out, which is pretty cool. I wish they had come with some kind of swatch sheet or something, but it wasn't too much trouble to just make my own that I could reference. The colors are listed on the back of the marker, aka the part that faces up when they're in the storage case. They also come with these stickers you can put on the barrel, but I didn't do that. Maybe some other time. As far as quality, these markers are pretty nice. I wasn't sure how opaque they'd be, and while some colors did need a few coats to go down completely opaque, they're generally pretty solid. The paint in them also dries really fast, which can be a good or a bad thing depending on what you want to use them for. In my Narita Brian piece, I mostly did blocky cell shading, meaning I wasn't trying to blend the colors very much. The paint drying so quickly meant I didn't have to wait very long before it was safe to paint on top with another color and not end up with streaky consistencies. However, for my Kelsier piece, I wanted to try blending the colors to get some more subtle shading, and because the paint dried so fast, I wasn't really able to do very much. I think the drying speed could be either a positive or a negative, depending on what you intend to use the markers for, but in my case, I mostly do flat colors without much blending, so I think it's fine. The range of colors is generally pretty good, but they went really hard on some color ranges and not very much on others. There's so many shades of light pink that are all pretty similar to the point I use them on the same piece right next to each other and can barely tell the difference, but there's way fewer to choose from once you get into the darker ranges. Like, the gray I used for Brian's hair is the darkest gray in the set before jumping straight to black, and I wish there was a wider range of darker colors to choose from. There's some darker colors, but they're all really bright and saturated, so seeing them add some less vibrant dark colors would be really nice. Overall, I really enjoyed getting to use these. I didn't have any troubles with the inconsistency, the paints went down really nicely, and cleanup afterwards was nice and easy. While I'm still not the best at using paint markers, I had fun with these, and it makes me want to experiment with doing more traditional pieces. Maybe I'll make a few more to sell at my next convention? But that's all for the marker talk, and now, before we go, it's time for Star's Webcomic Corner, the part of the video where I talk about some of my favorite webcomics, boast my fellow creators, and give you guys something new and fun to read. So, let's get into it. The people of London live in fear. Monsters like werewolves run rampant through the streets, and mad scientists like the infamous Dr. Frankenstein plot terrible schemes in their electrified laboratories. Every day, something new and terrifying presents itself. But what if the terrors of London weren't so terrifying after all? Enter Henry Jekyll, a self-proclaimed rogue scientist and high-class gentleman determined to show the people of London that they have nothing to fear. Is that werewolf really on a rampage, or is he only scared of the people chasing him with pitchforks? Is science truly so terrifying, or is it something that will ultimately change the world for the better? Using his charm, social standing, and love of scientific discovery, Jekyll aims to shine a positive light on the scientific world. But lurking under the surface, Jekyll hides a secret, and the dark side of his own twisted experiments threaten to topple everything he's worked for in the blink of an eye. The Glass Scientist is a webcomic I've been reading for a while, and there's a lot to love about it. The comic features several famous characters from Victorian literature reimagined for the story, including Jekyll and Hyde, Frankenstein, and others, but you don't have to be familiar with those stories to enjoy the work. I haven't, and I love it, so there's my endorsement. Every single page of this comic is gorgeous, filled with expressive and lovable characters alongside immaculately detailed backgrounds, all rendered in beautiful atmospheric colors. It's an absolute treat for the eyes, but the art definitely isn't the only good thing going for it. The writing is phenomenal, characters are all very deep and nuanced, and over the course of the story you truly learn to understand them, their darker sides and all. It's a story I've truly enjoyed, and I highly recommend you give it a look. If you'd like to read the comic for yourself, you can read the entire thing for free on the website, which I'll have linked in the description down below. Go check it out, and I hope you all enjoy. And that's gonna be it for this one. Thank you all so much for watching! It was fun to go back and do a Storytime video like I used to do all the time. I know a few of y'all were asking if I'd ever do more, and I'm honestly running a little low on stories at this point, but I do still have a few more ideas kicking around, so maybe I'll get to those someday. If you like this video and want to support the channel, make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and if you want to get a bunch of super special awesome bonus content like early videos and pages of my webcomic cast-off, you can join my Patreon. I've also been posting sketchbook pages and even some completed chapters of my work-in-progress novel Azure Mirage over there. First 2 chapters are free for everybody, link in the description, wink nudge. Thank you as always to my lovely patrons for supporting the channel, and a super special thank you to my video shout out to your patrons, Holly, Mr. Don Matsu, Alyssa Herzog, and Neon Valkyrie. Thank you for helping to fund the setup for my new art studio that I filmed this video in. I've got a whole room in my new house for drawing, and it's rad as hell. That said, that'll be all from me. Fare thee well, friends, and I will see y'all next time. Bye!